Americans have been faced with the obligation in the 20th century to start over once, sometimes twice, sometimes three times, very often as a result of either racial violence or racial discrimination. And being run can.
I settled for that little corner right there. it's pretty. I like that. It seemed just on the surface as such an impossible thing to do, because it seems the people that are on the property now, they didn't take it. You know, they somehow, as far as they're concerned, the purchase that they made was legitimate. And then, but maybe the ones that sold it to them maybe was a wrongdoer in some way.
Would have been great if we would still had something that, our kids and grandkids would be able to hold on to. We don't have anything to, pass down. And that would have been sort of a legacy, like. There would have been a lot of land there and a lot of blacks there had they not did what they did, had they not ran them all out in 1912. You said that it was a shame that they let this property get away.
Yeah, well, it is. We had no choice.
I know you didn't. Would you like to live back here again?
Yeah, we fix up, sure. Love it back here.
It is pretty. Let's get on down the road.
Okay.
The loss of land is really devastating for the African American community because it's not something that one can recover easily. Many African Americans have been faced with the obligation in the 20th century to start over once, sometimes twice, sometimes three times, very often as a result of either racial violence or racial discrimination. And being run out of town and losing one's land is one example of that.
St. Louis, the southernmost northern city, or the northernmost southern city, is home to two brothers whose family was expelled from Pierce City, Missouri in 1901.
My dad always told me that the family was run out of Pierce City. They had to leave Pierce City. But his mother never told him, so I never knew the reason why. About 3 years ago, I was at a conference and there's a lady sitting next to me. I asked her, where did she live? She said, Pierce City. And I said, my dad's parents lived there 100 years ago. And she grabbed my hand and said, I'm so sorry. I'm saying, well, why was this woman so sorry? Well, then I was more or less compelled to go to Pierce City. I asked if there was anyone in Pierce City that I could talk to.
He went to Pierce City Hall, and they immediately sent him to me because they knew that I knew what had happened to the African Americans. I laid these pieces of paper out, and he looked at this picture and read down here, group of Pierce City refugees in Springfield. Those are my people. He's practically started jumping up and down.
That's my great-grandmother. That's Aunt Pinky. That's my grandmother, Uncle Arthur, Uncle Ernest, Aunt Maria, Uncle Jamie, I believe. And these are the two they're Mosses. That's all my family. And it even tells a story how they escaped, where the bullets were coming through the house. They went to the cellar, and then from there they crawled through the grass, hit by the well. Bullets were hitting the wells. So then they ran off into the woods.
It's hard to imagine the hope that African Americans must have held in their hearts. They come to a place where they can own land. They come to a place where they can go to school. They come to a place where there's seemingly at least some sense that they have a right to exist. And I think there was a tremendous hope. And they began to settle the land, to homestead it, and to try to create lives for themselves.
If 1901 had never happened, my family might still be in Pierce City. They owned a 2-room home in Pierce City. They were very religious people. They might still be there.
This is your
Grandmother, that's Arminta Cobb. She's buried in Springfield, Missouri. This is her husband, James Cobb. James Cobb was the person I couldn't find when I did my research through Missouri. So I hired a researcher from St. Louis to try to find James for me. They found James on the death rolls in Pierce City. They found that James had died in 1898. He was buried from the AME Church in Pierce City. They found a location where James was buried in the Pierce City Cemetery. Here's a picture of the Pierce City Cemetery when I was down there trying to find my great-grandfather's grave, and they would not help me find his grave. Well, you see 3 people standing here. This is the gravedigger, Hollis. This is his assistant, and this is the president of the Cemetery Association. So she walks over to me and asks me if I had a deed for the lot James Cobb is buried in. So then she said that there's a tax for every year that the person has been in the ground. It's $1 a year. I never heard of such a thing. I said, well, that's no problem. How you want it? Cash, check, credit card? You know? Well, then they backed off of that. That's when they just said, well, we're just not going to do it because it's not concrete enough evidence for us to dig where you want us to dig. Well, I told them that, well, maybe we'll have to get a court order and do DNA. And the gravedigger turned and said, nobody's going to dig a grave up here ever, under any circumstance.
Why is this so important to you to do?
Closure. You know, the incident in Pierce City, like I told you, I was not really into addressing it. I was going to let sleeping dogs lie. But I was also looking for James Cobb. When I found that the incident has a direct bearing on James and my family and their peace of mind with knowing that their father and my great-grandmother's husband is buried back in Pierce City where they cannot go to pay tribute to him, then it became a personal thing with me. So my goal is to get James exhumed and moved to Springfield.
It seems like a simple request, a personal form of reparations. Why was the community so hostile to that? I drive to Pierce City to see Murray Bischoff at the local newspaper to learn more about the expulsion of black citizens in 1901.
There was nothing in town that told you what happened. The only thing that existed had been the original newspaper article in the Pierce City paper. And I read that article, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I said, what in the world is this? So I crafted together a 3-part story that we ran in 1991 on the 90th anniversary of the event. It was a sensation. And the old timers in Pierce City were enraged. I had a phone call from one senior citizen who flat out said, let old soldiers lie. That represented a lot of people in Pierce City, how people in Pierce City had been. And it became something that was very much a part of the community's character. When I had moved out here, I didn't know any of this. And I was sitting at my wife's cousin's house one day, and there was a fella visiting there, and he said, you know, I just like it around this part. And I like it around these parts just because there's no niggers. And I found even the best people in town had the N-word in their vocabulary. It was part of their culture. It wasn't necessarily a declaration of hostility, but it was there, and I knew it. I recognized it. It made me uncomfortable. the whole culture of this area evolved out of the eviction of those African Americans from Pierce City.
So I'm from New York City, and truthfully, I'd like to know anything that people may have heard about or know about a long, long time ago. One of the things that I'm interested in is that what happened in Pierce City in 1901 when the black population was wiped out. Do you know anything about that?
There used to be colored people in Pierce City. There was a church on the corner of Commercial there, and there was several families that lived here.
What happened to the colored people in Pierce City?
They had a hanging here in Pierce City, and the colored left.
My daughter-in-law worked at the paper. They've done stories on that since then.
Oh yeah, Murray at the Monet Times was doing a book on it. He researched it. He made a lot of people mad. People won't talk about it.
I lived in Wentworth, the next little town over, and so, you know, it was just always, we just always said that there wasn't any, never was any, colored people here, and they never, you know, we never seen any colored people, and you know, I think they put to death a colored man.
The time that I've been in the town, I've never seen anybody.
You've never
black.
seen a dark
No.
Negro? No. You probably won't.
Despite the candor of the seniors, I feel the weight of the town's denial of its past. Charles has asked Pierce City to do something it seems unable to do, to take responsibility for its history.
My name is Carol Hirsch. I was the first lady mayor in Pierce City. I lived here all my life. My family was here when it was created. There were some stories that most people didn't want to talk about. There was a black spot on our history. My grandmother was a young girl when the tragedy happened. She told me the mob formed at the jail. They came down the street. They formed a line. They said they stood shoulder to shoulder and just fired across into what we believe was the black community in this area here. I can hear it. It must have been horrible.
Are their descendants owed something, do you feel?
Probably owed an apology.
I know that you have been in correspondence with Charles Brown. My understanding is that Mr. Brown wants to remove the remains of his great-grandfather.
Yes, he does. Now, I may be mistaken, but I understand when he first came to town, he only wanted to mark his great-great-grandfather's grave. But he had an incident at the cemetery, and through Murray, I found out that it was not a good visit. I think he got really upset, and that's when he decided he wanted to move him. He wanted to move him out of perhaps harm's way. I still feel like there can be a compromise.
Come walk with me.
Yes, ma'am.
What are you thinking?
Like my great grandmother left here in 1901. She left him here and she couldn't come back here. And to know that he's gonna be with her, you know, spiritually, knowing that he'll be there.
Spiritually, he's already with her.
Well,
But you know, if you could help all of us have closure with stones here, and we know there, and then would be respected. And their names were there, and well, shoot, we know there, we've met you, I think it would help all of us.
Well, the thing about it is that Hazelwood is closer to St. Louis. It's where the other members of the family are. Pierce City is not a place where they would probably want to come.
But it's so peaceful here with the wildflowers and the birds.
Yeah.
And, my parents are buried right over there. You won't find a more peaceful place.
They asked me if I would be willing to put a monument near to where he's buried and we have a ceremony. And I said, well, what does that do? I just think that we'll have to come to a meeting of the minds. Because we're not the cause of him still being here. We were people that were progressive, educated. So who knows what we'd have done here. We were never given a chance. But that's all behind us now, How you doing today? I'm trying to see Don Lakin.
This is me.
Pleasure to meet
I thought
you.
you was going to call me before you come.
I know, but we got to town today and we went over to the cemetery and got a little excited.
Got a little excited.
Yeah.
How'd you get excited?
Well,
Are you Charles?
I'm Charles. This is my brother James.
How you doing? James, how are
Yeah.
you? I was up at the cemetery. I've been up at the cemetery a couple times looking at that situation. And I don't know who you're going to get to do this. I mean, you have to go through somebody to do it. But they're going to have to make sure that
Do you have the capacity to do this?
Yeah, I do. But if we open that grave, if that isn't your great-grandfather, then you're disturbing someone else's grave.
If I didn't have the records that said that the family purchased the plot up there, if I didn't have the newspaper article that says he was buried up there in that cemetery, then I probably wouldn't even be sitting here talking to you.
Well, as I said, the only way that I know to go about it, because you don't want, as I said, you don't want somebody buried up next to your family. It's not your family.
Okay.
The grave's unmarked, and that makes a big difference. That makes a big difference. I assume that I ought to get a hold of the county attorney and find out the right course to go about this.
What kind of time frame are we looking at response from the attorney?
I don't know. That's as truthful as I can be.
I know you've heard of what happened here and everything about it. If you were me and you found out about it and it was potentially your family and the rest of your family were not able to come back the year after they were expelled to put a wreath on his grave, when you asked me how I felt when I first came here, that's all I thought about.
It hasn't changed inside for you as far as family, as far as your family. And yes, I understand that.
This is your copy of the newspaper article. It was in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. That's our great-grandmother. That's Aunt Pinky. That's our grandmother. It's Uncle Ernest and Uncle Arthur, and those are all cousins. That's yours.
If Pierce City works with me on this, this would go a whole long way to show that Pierce City has changed.
In a situation like this, you need to reclaim the truth of history. Ideally, someone from the perpetrator culture is willing or able or accessible in some way to help you find the truth, which is even more recognizing than having to find it on your own. But finding the truth and reclaiming your family history, knowing what happened, is enormously important to feeling repaired.
This area here is a little bit different. It appears like there's a grave here.
Right.
And no, there's a possibility that there's one here. Do you know of anybody else that died at the same time he died that they would have used the lot?
No. And really, that's what we wanted when we came down here before. If you scrape this across here, we see the differential, then we know there's a body there. That's what we wanted.
Okay. Well, I'll get started and see what I can do.
Okay.
Is that fair enough? I mean, you know,
Yes.
I'll help you if I can, Charles.
Okay.
That's all I can tell you.
Okie doke. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Do you think that this action that you're doing in some way may contribute to forgiveness?
It'll be a very satisfactory thing for them to know that Pierce City is willing to help them do what they want to do, that nobody's against what they want to do. And I don't really think that they ever felt that people would be against what they done anyhow. They don't seem to be that type of gentleman. I think it'd be a closure for them. They don't want to go back. They don't want to come back to Pierce City to decorate their granddad's grave on account of the things that maybe happened to their family in this area over 100 years ago. But there has to be a forgiving area somewhere in there too.
A forgiving area. Maybe repair begins in that elusive space where perpetrators and victims find common ground.
How are you?
Okay, good. We're going to do this as respectful as we can. Okay. And I want you to understand
Oh,
that.
I understand.
But, you know, and I don't know what we're going to get when we get down there.
I know. I know Daddy smiled.
But you know, it's been a long he can go home tonight and know that he got accomplished what he wanted to get accomplished. So I'm pretty well satisfied with that.
Father, we come here gathered, try to put closure to everything that we found. Heavenly Father, we hope that the Cobb family is at peace now. In your name, amen.
Guys, hang it on. Okay. Lower it down. There you go.
Do you have your bill made out? Are you gonna mail it?
No, I'm gonna come over here and let's talk about that. This ain't my everyday realm, but if I charge you $750 for everything, is that being fair?
What I wanted to tell you is, and I really didn't do this because you're an elected official, and I didn't want you to have any problems with Pierce City. But, you know, my family feels that the best way to have any sort of healing is for Pierce City to actually make some kind of concession for this, to understand what went on, and that we feel that, you know, we were trying to keep the cost down, but our thought was for Pierce City to come forth and pick up the tab for all this. There's a letter that was being mailed to the mayor today, and I really felt bad about not telling you beforehand. But, you know, the person that started all this rolling was you.
Yeah.
And, you know, I really appreciate that, and I just hope that I don't offend you, you know, and I hope you understand where I'm coming from.
Well, I'm gonna have to get my cost of my casket from some place.
I understand.
You know, and
I know,
I'm not
I
being,
know. I know, but see, what's gonna happen is we'll see what the fallout is, and if things go down, then, you know, I'm an honorable man, we'll do what, you know.
I'm fully aware of that.
Yeah, like I said, I just didn't want you to be in an awkward situation with anything involved, you know. And I hope you understand my situation, but, so.
Don said that Charles was going to send the city a bill for $6,000. It's upset me very much. I've spent a lot of just natural goodwill. Pierce City's like my family. You know, I don't want anybody to look bad at my family or my town. But I feel like someone turned the tables on me. I was maybe used. I want someone to tell me I wasn't, that I was helpful, that I wasn't duped. I had no idea where this was going, other than yesterday I thought that would be a peaceful end. I'm going on home.
Mark, where should we go with you?
Where do you want to go?
Anywhere you're comfortable. Your office? I guess what I understood was that he thought this was by having the city pay for the disinterment and so forth, it was a way to kind of bring healing.